President Trump has given Iran 10 to 15 days to comply with the United States' demands. To me, this is an interesting number because it's a range. You've given an ultimatum, but you've given a range. So in theory, if you trip past the first point being 10 days, so now you're at risk to be on the receiving end of the United States military, which I argue is not something anyone ever wants to be on. Today, we're actually going to look at the target window of opportunity and what might be ideal for the United States to conduct operations. Now, it has been leaked inside or around the president's circles that the decision is basically made to go ahead and conduct operations, and it's a matter of days, not weeks, when this will kick off. And that the operations won't be a matter of hours, they'll last days, if not weeks. So sustained combat operations, which if you have been watching the channel, that is something I believe since day one. Based on the demands that Iran must meet, you're not going to achieve this with air power alone. If we're talking regime change, which the president has alluded to, air power alone, while it might help and bump it over the ledge, it's going to require additional factors. Maybe it is the Iranian people then overthrowing the government, but usually air power alone is not going to solve your regime change problem, nor do I think it's going to solve the demands that the United States has put out there. The first thing I want to look at is not super sexy. It's the moon. Again, maybe some of you guys really like the moon, and I get that, but the United States military owns the night. Looking at the illumination when you're flying at night is something that you do, and it comes into consideration all the time. Fun fact, if you want to hear more about Operation Midnight Hammer, I am recording a podcast series right now. I'm in the middle of the edit. There is a funny story from that night with the wild weasels and moonrise. So the moon is definitely a factor. Now, it is not the end all be all. Like, your target might be time sensitive, and the illumination of the moon and its position in the sky, be damned, you're going. But I think it's something that we always consider when conducting operations. Now, this is over Tehran in February. So right here, we're on February 23rd. You can see that the low illumination period has expired for the month. If you're looking at the right-hand column here, and the moon is waning, waxing, it's getting bigger. But nonetheless, even if the moon is getting brighter, its position in the sky clearly matters. In this case, the moon is below the horizon during nighttime hours. It sets about midnight, so it's going to be dark all night. If we look at the 3rd of March, we see a full moon happening. And then as the month goes along, on the 19th, that is when there is no moon. That said, when you get around the 15th, you start having the moon that is set for the early morning hours of the month. And just for giggles, if we jump back to Operation Midnight Hammer back in June, we can see a similar cadence with the moon having been set, but it rises at 1:40 a.m. And again, there is a pretty funny story that's coming out of the Midnight Hammer series with the moonrise and some of our wild weasel pilots there, because sometimes it looks like a surface-to-air missile. So again, the moon is not the only factor that goes into this, but it's definitely a piece that is going to be considered by the planners when it comes down to this. And then if we're doing sustained operations, it really only matters really for the first night, right? The surprise element. After that, once you punch the enemy in the face, they know you're coming and they know you're there. So again, the game changes a little bit. So obviously been stated, this is the largest buildup we've seen in quite a while in the Middle East. The fact that we have 2 carrier strike groups that are soon to be in the region. Open source tracking shows that the Gerald R4 is almost there. Having 2 aircraft carriers definitely bumps up the sustainment piece. However, it's really a short sprint for a couple days. And did an interesting video with Ward Carroll and Sal over on Ward's channel, talking about some of these factors with the Navy in and of itself. But again, this, for several days increases the Navy's capacity to conduct sustained operations. But again, it's not something that can be done for months on end or even weeks on end. Now, a piece that I find really interesting is the force laydown. And again, this is all over social media. It's just a wild time to be seeing all this and what's out there. But I have said, we needed the F-22 to show up. That's finally in and around the theater. You needed that air dominance platform. And then you really needed F-16 Block 50s and 52s to be able to go out there and do the Wild Weasel mission, that suppression of enemy air defense mission, being able to kick the door down and harass, degrade, disrupt, and destroy enemy surface-to-air missile sites. And that's the bread and butter of the F-16 Wild Weasel. So now we have McIntyre F-16s as well as Spangdahlem F-16s that specialize in that SEAD mission set. But if you follow social media and all the postings from FlightAware to, people in civilian airliners who are now filming ramps, F-35s, F-22s, tankers, C-17s, all sitting on the ramp. The issue is quickly going to become the logistics of this. Now that we have fighters and aircraft scattered across the Middle East to the Mediterranean, if that is what the force laydown is going to look like in some composition, range is a factor. I go back to my last deployment, flying out of one of these bases in particular. It often was an hour to an hour and 15-minute drive just before you really started to go to work. Now we're talking at ranges that could be 2, 3, 4 times that just to be able to get to Iranian airspace. A whole bunch of factors come in when we do that. If we just look at the fuel component alone, again, I have that Midnight Hammer piece, and we talk to maintainers, the logistics folks, the pilots. The logistics piece of this, when it comes to the fuel for Operation Midnight Hammer, was on such a magnitude that it beat nearly every record that the United States has had when it came to offloading gas in a single night for combat operations. Now, if you're talking all these distances, the strain it puts on the tanker fleet, just being able to make sure that the tankers have gas and enough gas to take off from the location, everything is working, everyone's showing up when they need to show up, and everyone has gas, that is a huge factor. Now, that is all assuming you can overfly a lot of the countries that you need to in order to get into Iran. And so far, it looks like that is changing up. We actually have Jordan. The foreign minister has publicly said that Jordan will not be a battlefield or a launch pad for any actions against Iran. Now, this doesn't say overflight. And again, they're a strong ally of the United States. They receive a lot of money from the United States. So how this one actually plays out, it'd be interesting. And at some point, if the United States just wants to go, they can go. And again, with open source reporting, you can see that Jordan actually is a big player when it comes to United States air power. The UAE, United Arab Emirates, has also said no utilization of airspace, land, or territorial waters, alongside Saudi Arabia, who has issued similar type statements. So again, if we look at Operation Midnight Hammer, which was an amazing military operation from not only a strategic, but a tactical execution, again, when you have a lot of the nations that you require for assistance to operate, for fuel, for airspace, for basing, saying, we're not going to allow you to participate. Now, on the one hand, you could do a one-off strike, and then maybe you can't go back there and land. It creates a whole diplomatic issue, which was one of the factors and considered with Operation Midnight Hammer. Maybe after Midnight Hammer, the pilots were thinking, I cannot go back and land at the base I took off from because that country has said, no way, after they figured out what we were doing. So when we hear 10 to 15 days, I don't think it is just a soundbite. It is a political clock that honestly handcuffs both the United States and Iran to making a decision because someone is going to end up with egg on their face. My take, this gives President Trump real short-range options for a sharp air campaign that is more sustained than Operation Midnight Hammer, but it still runs into gas, range, geography, and politics long before you get to any potential regime change, in my opinion. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you like this type of content, leaving a comment helps this out as we try to bring more real-time news alongside our podcast. So I'll see you next time.